When I watched my grandson's birthday party from across the street, I never expected to see what his mother whispered while blowing out the candles. What she said about me made my blood run cold. My name is Margaret Rose Collins, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived in the same small rental house in Riverside, California for the past 12 years, ever since I had to downsize after my husband Frank passed away. It's a modest two-bedroom bungalow with peeling yellow paint and a garden I can barely keep up with anymore. But it's mine, or at least I rent it. And it's about 15 minutes from my son David's beautiful two-story home in the Corona del Mar suburbs, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks like it belongs in a magazine, and every house has a three-car garage. For the past 8 years, since my grandson Ethan was born on a humid July afternoon at Riverside Community Hospital, I've never missed a single one of his birthdays. Not one. I was there when he turned one, when he smashed his chubby little fists into a blue frosted cake shaped like a whale. I was there when he turned two, dressed as a tiny dinosaur, roaring at all the guests. I was there for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Every single year, without fail, I showed up with a present wrapped in bright paper, a homemade card, and more love than I knew what to do with. Until this year, 3 weeks before Ethan's 8th birthday, I started waiting for the invitation. It was early June, and the California heat was already making my small house feel like an oven, even with all the windows open. David usually called about 2 weeks before the party, his voice cheerful and warm, asking what time I could make it and whether I wanted to help with decorations. Or Sarah, my daughter-in-law, would send a text message with all the details, the time, the theme, the color scheme for the gifts. She was always particular about those things. But this year, my phone stayed silent. The days crawled by, each one heavier than the last, weighted with a growing sense of dread I couldn't quite name. I told myself maybe they were planning a surprise party and didn't want to spoil it by telling me too early. Or perhaps they were just busy. David had mentioned his work at the architectural firm was demanding lately, lots of late nights and weekend projects. And Sarah, well, Sarah was always busy with something. Yoga classes and book clubs and volunteer work at Ethan's school. I tried to distract myself. I watered my struggling tomato plants in the backyard, even though I knew they weren't going to make it through the summer. I organized my kitchen cabinets, throwing out spices that had expired 3 years ago. I watched old episodes of The Golden Girls on television, the same episodes I'd seen a dozen times before, finding comfort in the familiar voices. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap, hoping it was David or Sarah with the party details. Each time, it was just a spam call about my car's extended warranty or a reminder that my library books were due. By the time there were only 2 days left until Ethan's birthday, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one Frank and I bought at a yard sale 30 years ago, and I stared at my phone for a long time. My hands were shaking. I felt ridiculous. I was 65 years old, a grown woman, a mother, a grandmother, and I was terrified to call my own son. But I picked up the phone anyway. It rang 3 times. I almost hung up. Then David answered. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice sounding strained, distant, like he was talking to me from the bottom of a well. "Oi, sweetheart." I tried to keep my voice light casual. I was just wondering about Ethan's party this weekend. What time should I be there, and should I bring anything? You know I can make those little finger sandwiches he likes, the ones with the cream cheese and cucumber. There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause that seemed to stretch on forever, filling my small kitchen with a silence so thick I could almost touch it. I heard him take a breath, then exhale slowly. "Mom, about that." He cleared his throat, and I could picture him rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was nervous. "Sarah and we've been talking, and we decided to keep it small this year. Just, immediate family and Ethan's school friends. You know how it is. The house isn't that big, and with all the kids running around, it just gets chaotic. We thought it would be easier with fewer people. Immediate family. The words hit me like a physical blow, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with a cold hand. I sat there, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white, trying to process what he just said. I'm not immediate family, I asked, and my voice came out barely above a whisper. Fragile and breaking. That's not what I meant, Mom. Don't twist my words. His tone shifted, becoming defensive. It's just that Sarah's been really stressed lately, with everything she's managing, and she thought it would be better if we kept the guest list manageable. I'm sorry, Mom. Maybe we can celebrate with you separately, okay? We can take Ethan out to dinner next week, just the four of us. Would that work? I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him when I became someone who needed to be managed, someone who made things chaotic, someone who was fewer people instead of his mother. I wanted to ask him if he remembered all the birthdays I'd given him when he was a boy, all the parties I'd thrown on our tiny budget, making decorations out of construction paper, and baking cakes from scratch because we couldn't afford the bakery. But instead, I just said, "Okay, hon, I understand. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd get it. You're the best." He sounded relieved, eager to get off the phone. I gotta run. I'm late for a meeting. Love you. Love you too, I whispered, but he'd already hung up. I sat there in my kitchen for a long time, after that call ended, watching the afternoon light fade through the window above the sink, turning everything golden and then orange and then that deep purple blue that comes just before dark. I didn't cry. I was too shocked to cry. I just sat there, feeling something inside me crack, a fissure forming, in a place I didn't know could still break. I didn't understand. Not at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, the same bed Frank and I had shared for 40 years before cancer took him, and I stared at the ceiling, tracing the familiar cracks in the plaster that looked like a map of somewhere I'd never been. My mind kept replaying every interaction I'd had with Sarah over the past year, like shuffling through a deck of cards, looking for the one that would explain everything. I remembered Thanksgiving, 6 months ago. I'd brought my famous sweet potato casserole, the one with the pecans and brown sugar that everyone always said was the best thing on the table. Sarah had barely touched it. She'd made this face when she thought I wasn't looking, a little wrinkle of her nose, and whispered something to her mother Linda, who'd flown in from Phoenix. They'd both laughed, covering their mouths with their hands, like teenage girls sharing a secret. I remembered Christmas, when I'd given Ethan a wooden train set I'd found at an antique shop, something real and solid and beautiful, not like the plastic toys he had mountains of. Sarah had smiled her tight smile, the one that never reached her eyes, and said, "How thoughtful, Margaret. They're vintage." The way she said vintage made it sound like a disease. I remembered Valentine's Day, when I'd stopped by to drop off heart-shaped cookies I'd made for Ethan. Sarah had answered the door in her yoga clothes, looking annoyed. "Margaret, we've talked about calling before you come over," she'd said, not even inviting me in. "Ethan's doing homework. Maybe next time?" She'd taken the cookies without thanking me and closed the door. I remembered Easter, when I'd asked if I could hide eggs in their backyard for Ethan's egg hunt. Sarah had said they were doing something small and intimate this year, just the three of them. When I'd seen the photos on Facebook later, there were at least 20 people in their backyard, including Sarah's entire family, all smiling in their pastel Easter outfits. I remembered Mother's Day, just 2 months ago, when David had called, but hadn't visited. "Sarah's got a whole thing planned," he'd said vaguely. "I'll see you soon, Mom. Promise." I'd spent the day alone, eating leftover Chinese food and watching a marathon of romantic comedies, feeling sorry for myself in a way I hadn't since Frank died. When did I become unwanted in my own son's life? When did I become the person who needed to call first, who needed permission, who needed to be excluded for the sake of manageability? I'd raised David by myself after Frank died, when David was just fifth. Frank, my beautiful Frank, with his booming laugh and his terrible jokes, and his way of making every day feel like an adventure, had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and was gone within 6 months. One day we were planning a trip to Yellowstone for the summer, and the next day I was picking out a casket and trying to figure out how to tell our son that his father was never coming home. After Frank died, money was tight. His life insurance helped, but it wasn't enough. I worked 3 jobs that first year, waitressing at a diner during breakfast and lunch shifts, cleaning houses in the afternoons, and doing data entry from home late at night. I survived on 4 hours of sleep and endless cups of coffee, and the knowledge that David needed me. I never missed his baseball games, even when my feet ached so badly I could barely stand. I never missed his school concerts, even when I had to leave work early and lose those hours of pay. I never missed a parent-teacher conference, a science fair, a track meet. I was there, always there, because that's what mothers do. I put David through college, working overtime, and taking out loans I'm still paying off. I helped him with his first apartment deposit, his first car down payment. I was there when he graduated, sitting in the stands at USC with tears streaming down my face, so proud I thought my heart would burst. I was there when he got his first job, when he got promoted, when he bought his first. And I was there in the hospital 8 years ago when Ethan was born, watching my son become a father, seeing the way his face transformed with wonder when the nurse placed that tiny, wrinkled baby in his arms. "His name is Ethan Franklin," David had said. His voice choked with emotion. "After Dad, Ethan Franklin Collins." I'd wept then, standing in that hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and new life, thinking about how Frank would have loved to meet this grandson, how he would have been the kind of grandfather who got down on the floor to play trains and never complained about the noise. When did all of that stop mattering? The morning of Ethan's birthday arrived like any other Saturday in June, hot and bright, the kind of day that made you squint even with sunglasses on. I woke up at 6, like I always do, my body trained by decades of early shifts and early meetings. I lay there for a while, listening to my neighbor Mr. Chen watering his garden, the rhythmic hiss of the hose, the sound of birds arguing in the big oak tree that shaded my bedroom window. I made myself get up. I shuffled to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. When did I get so old? My hair, which used to be a rich brown, was now more silver than anything. My face was mapped with lines, around my eyes, around my mouth, across my forehead. I looked tired. I looked like someone who had spent 65 years loving people and wasn't sure anymore if they loved her back. I made coffee in the old percolator Frank bought me for our 20th anniversary. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a piece of toast with strawberry jam, and I made a decision that I knew was crazy, maybe even pathetic, but I couldn't help myself. I had to see Ethan, even if it was just from a distance, even if he never knew I was there. I needed to see my grandson on his 8th birthday. Needed to know that he was happy, that he was loved, that he was okay. I know how it sounds. I know what people would say. Stalker, crazy grandmother, can't let go. But I didn't care. I'd been pushed out, excluded, treated like a stranger. And I needed to understand why. I needed to see what was so important that I couldn't be part of it. At 2 o'clock, I got dressed carefully, choosing clothes that wouldn't stand out, jeans and a plain blue t-shirt, and my old sneakers. I put my hair in a ponytail. I grabbed my purse, my phone, my car keys. My hands were shaking. The drive to David's neighborhood took 20 minutes. I knew the route by heart. Every turn, every stoplight. I'd driven it hundreds of times over the years. Bringing over dinner when Sarah was too tired to cook. Babysitting when David and Sarah needed a date night. Just stopping by to read Ethan a story before bed. Their neighborhood was the kind of place I'd dreamed of living in when I was younger, when Frank and I used to drive through fancy areas on Sunday afternoons, and imagine what our life could be like someday. Tree-lined streets with names like Willow Creek Drive and Maple Ridge Lane. Big houses with perfect lawns and two-car garages. Kids riding bikes on sidewalks that weren't cracked and broken. Dogs barking behind white picket fences that looked like they'd been painted yesterday. David's house was at the end of Sycamore Court, a beautiful craftsman-style home with gray siding and white trim and a red front door. He and Sarah had bought it 3 years ago, and I remembered helping them move in, carrying boxes until my back ached, assembling furniture late into the night, ordering pizza for everyone, and feeling like I was part of something, part of their family. I drove past the house once, slowly, taking it all in. Then I turned around and came back, parking my old Honda 3 houses down, across the street, where I could see their front yard, but hopefully wouldn't be easily noticed. I turned off the engine and sat there, feeling my heart hammering in my chest like it was trying to escape. The house looked beautiful. Colorful balloons in blue and green and yellow were tied to the mailbox, dancing and bobbing in the warm breeze. A banner that read, "Happy 8th birthday, Eth," hung across the front porch, the letters big and bright. Through the windows I could see people moving around inside, shadows and shapes, the bustle of a party getting ready to start. At 2:30, cars started arriving. Parents pulled up in their nice SUVs and sedans, and kids spilled out, holding wrapped presents in shiny paper. I recognized some of them from Ethan's school events I used to attend back when I was still welcome. There was Tommy Chen, the little Asian boy, who lived down the street and was Ethan's best friend. There was Sophia Martinez, with her long black braids, carrying a present almost as big as she was. There was Jake Peterson and his twin sister Emma, both wearing matching dinosaur t-shirts. One by one, they walked up to David's front door. Sarah answered each time, looking beautiful in a white sundress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile bright and welcoming. She hugged the parents, thanked them for coming, ushered the kids inside with warm laughter. I sat in my car watching all of this, and my chest ached with a pain I couldn't name. It felt like grief, but I wasn't sure what I was grieving for. The grandmother I used to be, the relationship I thought I had with my son, the future I thought I'd have with my grandson. At 3 o'clock, more people arrived. I saw Sarah's mother Linda pull up in her expensive white Lexus, stepping out in designer clothes and oversized sunglasses. Sarah's sister Jennifer was with her, carrying a huge gift bag. They went inside, and I saw Sarah embrace them both, laughing at something Jennifer said. Then at 3:15, I saw him, Ethan, my beautiful, perfect grandson, running out the front door into the yard, chasing after a ball that had gotten away from him. He was wearing a blue t-shirt with a dinosaur on it, and khaki shorts, and his light brown hair was getting long, falling into his eyes the way it always did. He needed a haircut. I'd always been the one to take him for haircuts, to the little barber shop on Main Street, where old Rodriguez would give him a lollipop and tell him jokes. Ethan grabbed the ball and stood there for a moment, looking around the yard, his small face thoughtful. For just a second, I swear he looked right at my car, right at me. My breath caught. Did he see me? Did he know I was there? Then Sarah called from the door, "Ethan, come inside, honey. It's almost time for cake." He turned and ran back to the house, disappearing through that red door, and I was alone again. I sat there for almost an hour, feeling like a stranger in a life I used to be part of. My back was starting to hurt from sitting in the car. My coffee from this morning was long gone, and my throat felt dry. But I couldn't leave, not yet. I needed to see him blow out his candles. I needed to see him happy on his birthday. At 4 o'clock, through the large living room window, I saw them gathering around the dining room table. The birthday cake. It was time. I could see the blue and green frosting, the plastic dinosaurs arranged on top, the 8 candles being lit one by one. I reached for my phone, not really knowing what I was going to do with it. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped it. That's when I remembered something that made my heart skip a beat. 6 months ago, for Christmas, I'd given David and Sarah a Ring doorbell camera. one of those fancy ones with the built-in speaker and the app you can monitor from your phone. I'd saved up for months to buy it, thinking it would make them feel safer, especially with Sarah sometimes being home alone with Ethan during the day when David was at work. I'd been there when David installed it, standing on the porch in the cold December afternoon, holding the screws and the drill bits, reading the instructions while David worked. He'd set up the app on his phone, and then, because I'd bought it, and because we were still close back then, he'd added me to the app too. "There you go, Mom," he'd said, showing me how it worked on my phone. "Now you can see when we're home, and if you ever need to drop something off when we're not here, you can ring the doorbell through the app, and we'll know." We'd laughed about it then, how fancy technology had become, how we were living in the future. I'd never used it after that day, but now, sitting in my car across the street, I opened my phone with shaking hands and found the Ring app. The camera was still active. I could see the front porch clearly, the welcome mat, the potted plants, the rocking chair where Sarah liked to sit in the mornings with her coffee. But more importantly, I could hear what was happening inside the house. The audio was on. My finger hovered over the screen. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to listen in on my grandson's birthday party like some kind of spy? But I'd already been excluded. I'd already been pushed out. What did I have to lose? I tapped the volume button, turning it up as high as it would go, and suddenly, I could hear everything. The sounds of children laughing and shouting, the clinking of plates and glass, music playing in the background, some cheerful pop song I didn't recognize. And then, David's voice, warm and full of joy, the voice of a father who loved his son. "Okay, buddy, everyone gather around. It's time for the birthday boy to make a wish." Through the window, I could see more clearly now. They were all crowded around the dining room table. Ethan was standing at the head, small and sweet, in his dinosaur shirt. The cake was in front of him, 8 candles flickering. David stood on one side, his hand on Ethan's shoulder. Sarah stood on the other side, holding her phone up to record the moment. "Make a good wish, sweetie," Sarah called out in her sing-song voice, the one she used around other people, the one that sounded nothing like the cold, clipped tone she used with me. I watched through the window as Ethan closed his eyes tight, his little face scrunching up in concentration, the way kids do when they're making a wish they really believe in. His small hands were clasped together in front of him. The other children had gone quiet, watching him. Even through the car window and the Ring camera audio, I could feel the anticipation in the room. My heart swelled watching him. God, I loved that boy. I loved him with a fierce, protective love that hadn't diminished one bit, despite being pushed away. Even from across the street, even uninvited and unwanted, even sitting in my old car like a stalker, I loved him with every fiber of my being. Then I heard it. His small voice, barely audible, but the Ring camera's microphone picked it up perfectly. "I wish," Ethan's voice was soft, tentative, the voice of a little boy who wasn't sure if wishes came true but hoped anyway. "I wish Grandma Margaret could be here. I miss her." The words hit me like a physical blow. My eyes immediately filled with tears. My hand flew to my mouth to muffle the sob that wanted to escape. He didn't forget me. After weeks of no contact, after missing his party, after being erased from this day, he hadn't forgotten me. He wanted me there, but what came next shattered me completely. Sarah's voice, low and sharp and filled with venom, thinking no one else could hear her as she leaned close to the cake. "Stupid kid. That old witch is better off gone anyway." The words were quiet. She'd barely whispered them. But the Ring camera's sensitive microphone caught every syllable, crystal clear through my phone's speaker. The pure hatred in her voice, the casual cruelty, the venom. I heard it. I heard all of it. Then in the blink of an eye, Sarah straightened up, and her face transformed. The sneer vanished, replaced by a bright, wide smile. the smile of a loving mother at her child's birthday party. She gestured to the cake with a flourish. Did you make your wish, sweetie? Now blow out the candles. The other parents clapped and cheered. David beamed with pride. The children shouted, blow them out, blow them out. But Ethan didn't look happy. Through the window, I could see his little shoulders slump. His face, which had been bright with hope just seconds ago, now looked sad and confused. He'd hurt her too. I could tell by the way his eyes dimmed, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. He took a breath and blew out the candles. Everyone cheered. But I saw the truth in his face. My grandson was hurting. I sat in that car, my hands shaking so badly I had to set the phone down on the passenger seat. My entire body was trembling. Rage, pain, grief, shock, all of it was washing over me in waves, so intense I thought I might be sick. I rolled down my window, gulping in the hot June air, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to process what I'd just heard. This woman my son had married, this woman who lived in a beautiful house and drove a nice car and wore expensive clothes and smiled her perfect smile for everyone. This woman had just called me an old witch on my grandson's 8th birthday. She'd said I was better off gone, and she'd said it right in front of him, thinking she could whisper it away, thinking no one would hear. But I'd heard every single word, and something inside me changed in that moment. Something cold and hard and sharp settled into place where there had once been softness. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just sad. I was furious, and underneath that fury was something even more powerful: determination. I started my car, pulled away from the curb, and drove home in a daze. I don't remember the drive. One moment I was sitting across from David's house, and the next I was pulling into my own driveway, putting the car in park, sitting there with the engine ticking as it cooled. That old witch is better off gone anyway. Gone. What did she mean by gone? Did she mean dead? Did she wish I would die so I'd be out of their lives permanently? Or did she just mean out of their lives, disappeared, erased, forgotten? Either way, the message was clear. Sarah wanted me gone, and she was making it happen, slowly, methodically, cutting me out of their lives, one event at a time, one exclusion at a time, one lie at a time. For the next 3 days, I didn't call, I didn't text, I didn't reach out to David or try to explain what I'd heard. I just existed in a kind of numb shock, moving through my small house like a ghost, eating meals I didn't taste, sleeping in fits and starts, waking up at 3 in the morning with my heart pounding, and those words echoing in my mind. That old witch is better off gone anyway. I'd spent my whole life being kind, being understanding, being the bigger person. When David was a teenager and said cruel things to me in the heat of adolescent anger, I'd forgiven him. When Frank's mother made snide comments about my cooking and my housekeeping and my parenting, I'd smiled and nodded and let it roll off my back. When my sister Ellen borrowed money and never paid it back, I'd let it go. When my boss at the diner grabbed my ass and I needed the job too badly to report him, I'd swallowed my rage and kept serving coffee with a smile. I'd always been the peacekeeper, the accommodating one, the woman who didn't make waves. But something in me had broken, or maybe something in me had finally woken up. On the 4th day after Ethan's birthday, my phone buzzed with a text message. I was sitting in my backyard, watching my dying tomato plants, and thinking about nothing and everything, when I heard the phone chime. It was from David. Sorry we missed you at the party, Mom. Ethan had a great time. We'll do lunch soon, okay? Maybe next week? I stared at that message for a long time. He had no idea. He had no idea I'd been there, sitting in my car, across the street like some kind of stalker. He had no idea what I'd heard. He had no idea that his wife had called his mother an old witch at his son's birthday party. Or did he know? Was he in on it? Had he heard what Sarah said and just let it go? Or was he so deep under her spell that he didn't even notice anymore? When she was cruel, I typed back, "Sounds good, honey. Let me know when." But I didn't wait for lunch. I couldn't just sit around anymore, drowning in hurt feelings and unanswered questions. I needed to do something. I needed to take control of this situation, even if I didn't know yet what that meant. I started making calls. First, I called my old friend Rita Ferguson, who'd been a family attorney for 30 years before she retired. We'd been friends since our kids were in elementary school together, carpooling to soccer practice and sharing potluck dinners. Rita was sharp as a tack, tough as nails, and the kind of person who always told you the truth, even when it hurt. "Rita," I said when she answered, "I need to talk to you about something legal. Do you have time?" "For you? Always. Come over for coffee. I'll make those lemon bars you like." An hour later, I was sitting in Rita's sunny kitchen, surrounded by plants and family photos, eating a lemon bar and telling her everything: the exclusion from the party, the Ring camera audio, what Sarah had said, what Ethan had wished. All of it came pouring out, and once I started talking, I couldn't stop. Rita listened without interrupting, her sharp brown eyes focused on me with complete attention. When I finally finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tapping on the kitchen table the way they always did when she was thinking hard about something. "Margaret," she finally said, her voice gentle but serious, "I need you to understand something. Legally, there's not much you can do here, unless you can prove that Sarah is actually harming Ethan." What she said was cruel and hateful, yes, but it's not illegal to say mean things about your mother-in-law, even if your child overhears. My heart sank. So there's nothing I can do. I just have to accept being pushed out of my grandson's life? I didn't say that. Rita leaned forward. What we're talking about here is parental alienation. It's when one parent, or in this case one parent figure, deliberately tries to damage a child's relationship with another loved one. It's emotional abuse, Margaret, and while it's hard to prove, it's not impossible. What do I need? Documentation, evidence. You need to show a pattern of behavior. The audio recording you have is a start, but you need to document every interaction, every exclusion, every time she prevents you from seeing Ethan or speaks badly about you to him. Keep a journal, save every text message and email. If there are other people who've witnessed her behavior, their testimony could help too. I nodded, my mind already racing. And then what? What can I actually do with all that? Rita's expression softened with sympathy. In California, grandparents can petition for visitation rights under certain circumstances. If you can prove that you had a significant relationship with Ethan and that being cut off from you is harmful to him, you might have a case. But Margaret, I have to be honest with you. These cases are difficult. Courts generally defer to the parents' wishes. It's expensive. It's emotionally draining. And it could make your relationship with David even worse. It can't get much worse, I said, quietly. Don't be so sure. Legal action tends to burn bridges. But, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes it's the only way to protect a child from emotional harm. Only you can decide if that's the path you want to take. I left Rita's house with my mind spinning and a heavy weight in my chest. Legal action felt so extreme, so nuclear. But what was the alternative? Just accepting that I'd been erased from Ethan's life, watching from a distance while Sarah poisoned my grandson against me. When I got home, I called my nephew James, my sister Ellen's son, who worked in IT at a tech company in San Diego. James was 30 years old, brilliant with computers, and the kind of kid who'd always had a soft spot for his Aunt Margaret. "Hey, Aunt Maggie," he answered cheerfully. "What's up?" "James, I need your help with something technical. Can you walk me through how to save and back up a video file? It's important. Sure, no problem. What kind of file is it? I explained about the Ring camera, the audio recording, everything. James listened without judgment, which I appreciated. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Aunt Maggie, I'm really sorry you're going through this. That's messed up. Here's what you need to do. For the next hour, James patiently walked me through the process of downloading the video from the Ring app, saving it to my phone, backing it up to my computer, uploading it to a cloud storage service, and even emailing a copy to myself for good measure. By the time we finished, that doorbell footage, the video that showed nothing but an empty porch but contained audio of everything that mattered, was saved in 5 different places. There, James said with satisfaction. That file's not going anywhere. Even if someone deletes your Ring account or something, you've still got copies. Thank you, James. I really appreciate this. Anytime. And Aunt Maggie, I don't know what you're planning to do with that recording, but whatever it is, I hope it works out. You deserve better than this. After I hung up with James, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the video file icon. Such a small thing. Just a few megabytes of data. But it contained proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy or overly sensitive or imagining things. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a new document and started writing. I titled it Documentation Journal and began recording everything I could remember from the past year. Every exclusion, every cold interaction, every time Sarah had cut a visit short or made an excuse why I couldn't see Ethan. I wrote about Thanksgiving and the way she'd wrinkled her nose at my sweet potato casserole. I wrote about Christmas and the vintage comment. I wrote about Valentine's Day and being turned away at the door. I wrote about Easter and the Facebook photos of a party I wasn't invited to. I wrote about Mother's Day, spent alone. The words poured out of me for hours. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, and I had 10 pages of single-spaced memories, each one a small cut that added up to a gaping wound. I saved the document and backed it up, just like James had taught me. Then I went to bed, exhausted but feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: purpose. The next morning I woke up with a plan. I wasn't going to confront Sarah. I wasn't going to beg David to let me back into their lives, and I wasn't ready yet for the nuclear option of legal action. No, I was going to do something much simpler and much harder. I was going to watch, wait, and document. I was going to be patient. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in 65 years of living, it's that people who whisper poison eventually shout it. People who are cruel in private eventually slip up in public. I just had to be ready when it happened. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a woman on a mission. Every day I drove past Ethan's school during pickup time, not close enough to be seen, but close enough to walk. I parked half a block away, behind a delivery truck or another car, and I observed. I watched Sarah arrive at 3:15 every day in her white SUV, usually on her phone, barely looking up when Ethan climbed into the back seat. I never saw her ask him about his day, or ruffle his hair, or give him a hug. She just pointed to the car and waited for him to get in. I watched other mothers greet their children with enthusiasm, kneeling down to hear about their day, carrying their backpacks, holding their hands. But Sarah always seemed annoyed, impatient, like picking up her son was an inconvenience in her busy schedule. One day, I saw something that made my blood boil. Ethan came out of school carrying a painting, clearly something he'd made in art class. It was colorful and messy and wonderful, the way children's art always is. He ran up to Sarah's car, holding it up proudly, wanting to show her. From my spot down the street, I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Sarah's reaction. She glanced at the painting for less than a second, then said something while gesturing to the back seat. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He climbed into the car, and I saw him through the window, looking down at his painting with a sad expression. Sarah tossed it carelessly into the back without another glance. I wrote it all down in my journal that night: date, time, location, what I observed, building my case, piece by piece. I also started talking to people, carefully, subtly, without making it obvious what I was doing. I called Ethan's school and asked to speak to his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman in her 50s, who'd been teaching second grade for 20 years. Mrs. Patterson, this is Margaret Collins, Ethan's grandmother. I was wondering if I could schedule a time to talk with you about how he's doing this year. There was a brief pause. Oh, Mrs. Collins. Of course. I have to say, I'm glad you called. I've actually been meaning to reach out to the family. Ethan's been having some difficulties lately. My heart clenched. What kind of difficulties? Well, his grades are fine, and he's not acting out or anything like that, but he's been very withdrawn. He doesn't play with the other children as much as he used to. During recess, he often sits by himself, and a few times, I've found him crying in the coat room. When I ask him what's wrong, he just says he misses someone. But he won't tell me who. I closed my eyes, feeling tears sting behind my lids. When did this start? I'd say around March or April. It's been getting progressively worse. Miss Collins, I mentioned this to Mrs. Collins, Sarah, during our last parent-teacher conference, but she seemed to brush it off, said it was probably just a phase. But I've been teaching for a long time, and this doesn't feel like a phase to me. This feels like a child who's grieving. Thank you for telling me this, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate your concern. Of course, you know Ethan talks about you sometimes. He says you used to read him stories and make him chocolate chip cookies. He misses you very much. I had to end the call after that because I couldn't speak without sobbing. My grandson was suffering, and his mother didn't care, or worse, she knew and was glad. I documented that conversation too, printed out the call log from my phone, wrote down everything Miss Patterson had said, word for word while it was still fresh in my memory. A few days later, I did something else I'd never done before. I went to David's office. I'd never visited him at work, always respecting his professional space. But I needed to see him, and I knew if I called, he'd just make excuses about being busy or promise to call me back later, and then never do. The architectural firm where David worked was in a modern glass building downtown, all sleek lines and expensive furniture. In the lobby, I felt out of place in my simple cotton dress and comfortable shoes, surrounded by young professionals in designer suits, carrying expensive coffee. I asked the receptionist if David Collins was available. She made a call, then smiled politely. He'll be right down, ma'am. You can wait over there. I sat in one of the uncomfortable modern chairs and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. I was starting to think he wasn't coming when I saw him step out of the elevator. He looked good. My son always looked good. Tall and handsome in his charcoal suit. His dark hair neatly styled. His tie perfectly knotted. He looked successful and confident, and nothing like the teenage boy who used to come home from school and cry in my arms about the bullies who made fun of his second-hand clothes. Mom? He looked surprised, and not pleasantly. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? Everything's fine, honey. I just wanted to see you. We haven't really talked since Ethan's birthday. He glanced around the lobby, clearly uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Work's been crazy. Listen, I'm actually in the middle of something right now. Can we do this later? This will only take a minute. I kept my voice calm, pleasant. I was just wondering when we could schedule that lunch you mentioned with Ethan. I'd really like to see him. David rubbed the back of his neck, that old nervous gesture. Right, yeah, about that. She's been dealing with some stuff lately. Stress, you know. Maybe we should wait a few more weeks until things calm down. A few more weeks. Yeah, just until Sarah feels better. You understand? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw what I'd been refusing to see for months. He wasn't being manipulated. He was choosing this. He was choosing Sarah's comfort over his mother's feeling. He was choosing to keep the peace in his marriage over maintaining a relationship with the woman who'd raised him. I understand, I said quietly. Thank you for your time, David. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Mom, don't be like that. It's not personal. It's just, You know how Sarah is. She gets overwhelmed easily, and having a lot of people around stresses her out. I turned back. I'm not a lot of people, David. I'm your mother and Ethan's grandmother. When did I become stress instead of family? He flinched. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not, but it's honest. I left the building before he could say anything else. I didn't cry until I got to my car. That night, I documented the conversation. Then I sat at my kitchen table and made a decision. I was going to have to force the issue. Waiting and watching wasn't enough. If David wouldn't let me see Ethan willingly, I'd have to find another way. I pulled out my phone and sent a text message to David. I'm requesting a formal visit with Ethan this Sunday at 2 p.m. I'll come to your house. This is non-negotiable. I knew the message was harsh. I knew it would make him angry, but I was done being patient. I was done being accommodating. I was done disappearing quietly so Sarah could be comfortable. My phone rang less than 5 minutes later. David, Mom, what the hell? You can't just demand to see Ethan. That's not how this works. How does it work, David? Because the way it's been working is that I don't see my grandson at all. So I'm changing the arrangement. Sarah's not going to like this. I don't care what Sarah likes. I'm not asking for her permission. I'm telling you that I'm coming to see my grandson, and you can either let me in the door or explain to Ethan why his grandmother is standing on the porch. There was a long silence. You're really doing this? Yes. Another silence. Fine. Sunday at 2, but just for an hour, Mom. That's it. Thank you. He hung up without saying goodbye. Sunday arrived, with the kind of bright sunny weather that felt like a mockery of my anxiety. I barely slept Saturday night, going over and over in my mind what I would say, how I would act, what I would do if Sarah was openly hostile. I dressed carefully in a nice blouse and slacks, nothing too fancy but presentable. I wanted to look like a grandmother who had her act together, not like the desperate old woman I felt like inside. At exactly 2 p.m., I pulled up to David's house. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I took several deep breaths, said a quick prayer to Frank, asking him to give me strength, and got out of the car. I walked up to that red front door, the same door I'd watched from across the street on Ethan's birthday, and rang the doorbell. I heard the Ring camera chime, and I wondered if Sarah was watching me on her phone, seeing me standing there, deciding whether to let me in. The door opened. David stood there, his expression neutral. Hey, Mom. Hi, honey. He stepped aside to let me in. The house was immaculate. As always, everything in its place, every surface gleaming, every throw pillow perfectly arranged. It looked like a magazine spread, not like a house where an 8-year-old boy lived. Where's Ethan? I asked. Upstairs. I'll get him. David disappeared up the staircase. I stood in the entryway feeling like an intruder in a house where I'd once been welcome. I heard footsteps, and Sarah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at me with those cold blue eyes, her expression perfectly pleasant, perfectly fake. Margaret, how nice of you to visit. Sarah, can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? No, thank you. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice low and sharp. I hope you know that you're only here because David insisted. This really isn't a good time. When would be a good time, Sarah? Because I've been waiting for months. Her eyes hardened. Maybe if you weren't so needy and demanding, we'd want you around more. Did you ever think of that? Before I could respond, I heard the thunder of footsteps on the stairs. And then Ethan appeared, running full speed down the staircase with David following behind. Grandma, Ethan's face lit up with pure joy. He launched himself at me, wrapping his small arms around my waist and squeezing tight. You came! You really came! I dropped to my knees and hugged him back, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo, feeling his little heart beating against mine. Of course I came, baby. Of course I did. I missed you so much. His voice was muffled against my shoulder. Where have you been? I missed you too, sweetheart. So much. I looked up and saw Sarah watching us with an expression of pure disgust. David looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Ethan, Sarah said sharply, why don't you show Grandma the new video game you got? You can play in the living room. For the next hour, I sat on the couch while Ethan showed me his video game, told me about school, shared every thought and feeling that had been building up during our weeks apart. He sat pressed against my side the whole time, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. Sarah disappeared into the kitchen. David hovered awkwardly for a while, then excused himself to catch up on some work in his home office. It was just me and Ethan, and for that hour everything felt right again. But an hour passes quickly when you're happy. Before I knew it, David was standing in the doorway, looking at his watch. Mom, it's 3 o'clock. My time was up. Ethan's face fell. Already? But Grandma just got here. I know, buddy, but we talked about this. Grandma has to go now. But when will I see her again? David looked at me, then at Ethan. Soon, okay? Soon. When is soon? Ethan, that's enough. Say goodbye to Grandma. I hugged Ethan tight, fighting back tears. I love you so much, sweetheart. Don't ever forget that. I love you too, Grandma. Please come back soon. I will. I promise. David walked me to the door. On the porch, out of Ethan's earshot, I turned to him. David, that little boy is hurting. Can't you see that? He's fine, Mom. You're being dramatic. His teacher says he's withdrawn and crying at school, that he's grieving. Does that sound fine to you? David's expression shifted to surprise. You talked to his teacher? Yes, because someone needs to be paying attention to what's happening to that child. You had no right. I have every right. I'm his grandmother. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then David said quietly, I think you should go. I left, but as I walked to my car, I heard something that made me stop. Through the open window I could hear Sarah's voice, loud and angry. I can't believe you let her in this house, after everything I said. She's my mother, Sarah. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to tell her no. You were supposed to protect this family from her toxic influence. She's not toxic. She's just lonely. Lonely? She's manipulative. She's trying to turn Ethan against me. Can't you see that? Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the house. But I'd heard enough. I got in my car and drove away, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got home, I documented everything. The visit, the conversation with Sarah, what I'd overheard. Then I sat at my kitchen table and cried for an hour straight, ugly sobbing tears that left me exhausted and hollow. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I was done waiting. I was done being patient. I was done hoping that David would suddenly wake up and see what was happening. Tomorrow, I was calling Rita back. Tomorrow, I was starting the legal process to petition for grandparent visitation rights. It was going to be expensive and painful, and might destroy what was left of my relationship with David. But Ethan needed me, and I'd be damned if I was going to abandon him. The next 3 weeks were a blur of consultations with Rita, gathering documentation, filling out forms, and preparing my case. Rita warned me repeatedly that it would be difficult, that the courts favored parental rights, that I might lose. But I kept thinking about Ethan's face when he saw me. The way he'd held on to me like I was his lifeline. The way he'd asked when he'd see me again. That little boy needed someone in his life who put him first, who loved him unconditionally, who wasn't playing games or keeping score. He needed his grandmother. 2 weeks before we were scheduled to file the petition, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer. Mrs. Collins? This is Principal Anderson from Riverside Elementary. I'm calling about your grandson, Ethan. My heart stopped. What happened? Is he okay? Physically, he's fine, but Mrs. Collins, we had an incident this morning. Ethan had what we can only describe as an emotional breakdown in the classroom. He became hysterical, crying and saying that he wanted his grandma, that nobody cared about him, that he wished he could live with you instead of with his parents. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Oh my God. His teacher called Mr. and Miss Collins, and they're on their way to pick him up. But Mrs. Collins, I'm calling you because Ethan specifically asked Mrs. Patterson to call you. He gave her your phone number. He said you're the only person who really listens to him. Tears were streaming down my face. Can I talk to him? I'm afraid he's with the school counselor right now. But Mrs. Collins, I think it would be beneficial if you could come to the school for a meeting today, if possible, with Mr. and Mrs. Collins. We need to discuss what's happening with Ethan, and he clearly wants you involved. I'll be there. What time? Can you make it by 9? Mr. and Mrs. Collins should be here by then. I'll be there. I hung up and immediately called Rita. Something's happened. Ethan had a breakdown at school. They want a family meeting, and I'm invited. Margaret, this could be exactly what you need for your case. Make sure you stay calm, be professional, and document everything that's said. I will. I got dressed quickly, my hands shaking with anxiety and adrenaline. Then I drove to Ethan's school, praying the whole way that I'd be able to help him, that this wouldn't make things worse, that somehow this nightmare would start to turn around. When I arrived at the school, the receptionist directed me to the principal's office. I walked down the familiar hallway, past the colorful bulletin boards and the children's artwork, and knocked on the door marked Principal Anderson. Come in. I opened the door and stepped into a large office with a conference table. Principal Anderson, a tall woman in her 60s with kind eyes, stood up to greet me. Mrs. Collins, thank you for coming. David and Sarah were already there, sitting on opposite sides of the table. David looked exhausted, his tie loose and his hair messy. Sarah looked furious, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her jaw clenched. Mom, David said, surprised. What are you doing here? I invited her, Principal Anderson said calmly. Ethan specifically requested that his grandmother be present for this meeting. Sarah's head snapped around to glare at the principal. With all due respect, that's not appropriate. This is a matter for Ethan's parents to handle. Mrs. Collins, Principal Anderson said, her voice firm but polite. Ethan is exhibiting signs of significant emotional distress. He is asking for his grandmother. As educators, we have to prioritize the child's well-being. If he feels that his grandmother is a source of support, then she should be included in this conversation. This is ridiculous, Sarah muttered, but she didn't leave. I sat down at the table, as far from Sarah as possible. Principal Anderson sat at the head of the table and folded her hands. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I want to be clear about why we're here. Ethan is struggling. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, has noticed increasing withdrawal and sadness over the past several months. This morning, he had a complete emotional breakdown in the classroom. He was inconsolable for over 30 minutes. David leaned forward. What triggered? Mrs. Patterson was reading a book about families, and one of the characters mentioned their grandmother. Ethan started crying and couldn't stop. When Miss Patterson took him to the hallway to talk privately, he told her that he misses his grandmother desperately, that he doesn't understand why he can't see her anymore, and that he feels like nobody in his family loves him. The words hung in the air like a bomb. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I forced them back. David looked stricken. Sarah's expression remained cold. That's absurd, Sarah said sharply. We love Ethan very much. He's being dramatic. He's 8 years old, Principal Anderson said. 8-year-olds don't fake emotional breakdowns. Mrs. Collins, may I ask, has there been a recent change in Ethan's relationship with his grandmother? Sarah and David exchanged a look. David cleared his throat. We've been trying to establish better boundaries. My mother was becoming too involved in our family life, and it was causing stress. I see. And was Ethan informed about these boundaries? Not specifically. We just started limiting visits. Principal Anderson turned to me. Mrs. Collins, may I ask your perspective on this situation? I took a deep breath. This was my chance. I've been excluded from my grandson's life for several months now. I wasn't invited to his birthday party. I've been denied visits. When I finally insisted on seeing him 2 weeks ago, I was allowed exactly 1 hour, and Sarah made it very clear I wasn't welcome. Principal Anderson, I love that little boy more than anything in this world. I would never do anything to hurt him, but I'm being pushed out and he's suffering because of it. She's lying, Sarah said coldly. She's manipulative and overbearing, and we have every right to limit her access to our son. Mrs. Collins, Principal Anderson said, addressing Sarah, I understand that parental rights are paramount, but I need you to understand that we have a responsibility to report when we believe a child is experiencing emotional harm. Ethan's mental health is deteriorating. He's withdrawn, he's crying frequently, he's falling behind in his schoolwork, and now he's having breakdowns at school. Something needs to change. Are you threatening to call CPS? Sarah's voice was sharp and dangerous. I'm saying that we are concerned about Ethan's well-being. If things don't improve, yes, we may need to involve outside resources. The room fell silent. David looked like he might be sick. Sarah's face had gone pale with anger. Finally, David spoke. What do you suggest we do? I suggest that you prioritize Ethan's emotional needs. If seeing his grandmother brings him comfort and stability, then that should be encouraged, not prevented. I also strongly recommend that Ethan start seeing a family therapist who can help him process whatever he's experiencing. Fine, David said quietly. We'll set that up. Principal Anderson looked at me. Mrs. Collins, would you be willing to have more regular contact with Ethan? Absolutely, anytime, anywhere. I just want him to be okay. Sarah stood up abruptly. This meeting is over. David, we're leaving. David looked between his wife and his mother. Conflict written all over his face. Then he stood up slowly. Mom, I'll call you, okay? We'll figure something out. David, I'll call you. I promise. They left. I stayed behind for a moment with Principal Anderson, who gave me a sympathetic look. Mrs. Collins, off the record, I think you should know that Mrs. Patterson has documented concerns about emotional neglect in Ethan's home. If you're considering legal action to establish grandparent rights, these records could support your case. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for caring about him. He's a good kid. He deserves better than this. I left the school feeling shaken but also hopeful. Maybe finally, people were starting to see what was really happening. Maybe Ethan was finally going to get the help he needed. That evening, my phone rang. It was David. Mom, we need to talk. I'm listening. Sarah and I have been fighting since we left the school. About you, about Ethan, about everything. And Mom, I realized something today. I've been so focused on keeping Sarah happy that I forgot to check if my son was happy, and he's not. He's miserable. I could hear the tears in his voice. I heard what Principal Anderson said, David continued, about emotional neglect, about possible CPS involvement. Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared I've failed Ethan. I'm scared I've been letting Sarah control everything, and I didn't see what it was doing to my son. David, no, let me finish. I heard what Sarah said to you at his birthday party. I went back and listened to the Ring camera footage because I needed to know if you were exaggerating. And Mom, you weren't. I heard every word. I heard her call you an old witch. I heard the venom in her voice, and I did nothing. He was crying now, really crying. I've been a coward, Mom. I've chosen Sarah's comfort over everyone else's well-being, over yours, over Ethan's, maybe even over my own, and I don't know how to fix it. David, listen to me. The fact that you're recognizing this is the first step, but recognizing it isn't enough. You need to act. Ethan needs you to act. I know. Mom, I'm going to insist that we start family therapy, and I'm going to insist that you're part of Ethan's life again, regularly, not just occasional visits. If Sarah can't accept that, then, he trailed off. Then what? Then I'll have to make some hard decisions about my marriage. We talked for another hour that night, really talked, the way we hadn't in years. David told me things I'd suspected but he'd never confirmed. How Sarah constantly criticized him, how she controlled their finances and their social calendar, how she'd isolated him from his friends and family, just like she'd isolated Ethan from me. By the end of the conversation, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. 2 days later, David called again. Mom, Sarah and I are separating. What? I told her she needed to go to family therapy with me, and she refused. She said if I wanted to let you back into our lives, she'd leave. So I called her bluff. I said, okay, leave. And she did. She's staying with her mother in Phoenix for now. David, I never wanted to break up your marriage. You didn't break it up, Mom. It was already broke. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Sarah's been emotionally abusive to all of us. The therapist I've started seeing helped me see that. I'm done pretending everything's fine when it's not. How's Ethan? He's sad about his mom leaving. But honestly, Mom, he seems lighter already. He asked if you could come over for dinner tonight. I started crying. I'd love that. Come at 6. And Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. I should have listened to you months ago. I should have protected you and Ethan from her. I should have been a better son. You're being a good son now, honey. And you're being a good father. That's what matters. That was 3 months ago. Today, I'm sitting on David's porch, watching Ethan play soccer. In the yard, he's kicking the ball against the fence, each successful kick followed by a triumphant. The afternoon sun is turning everything golden, and for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace. David and Sarah are officially separated, in the process of divorcing. Sarah gets supervised visitation with Ethan twice a month. Supervised because during the custody evaluation, her pattern of emotional manipulation and alienation came to light. The court-appointed counselor recommended limited contact until Sarah completes therapy and demonstrates healthier parenting patterns. Ethan is seeing a child therapist twice a week. He's doing better, laughing more, sleeping through the night again. His teacher says he's re-engaging with his classmates, and his schoolwork is improving. And me, I see Ethan all the time now. Every Wednesday, I pick him up from school, and we go to the library, or the park, or out for ice cream. Every Friday night, he sleeps over at my house, and we make pancakes for breakfast on Saturday morning. Every Sunday, he comes to David's house, and we have dinner together, the three of us, rebuilding our family piece by piece. Last week, Ethan asked me something while we were reading together, before bed. Grandma, why didn't you come to my birthday party? I'd been dreading this question, but I'd also prepared for it with his therapist's help. Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups make mistakes. Your mom was going through some things, and she made some choices that hurt people. She didn't invite me to your party, and that was wrong, but I was there, in my own way. I was thinking about you all day, and I heard your birthday wish. You did? I did. You wished I could be there. He thought about this for a minute, his small face serious. Next year you'll be there for real, right? Wild horses couldn't keep me away. He grinned, showing the gap where he'd lost a tooth last week. Promise? Promise. He hugged me tight, and I held him close, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo, feeling grateful for second chances, and for having the courage to fight for what mattered. As I sit here now watching him play, I think about that moment at his 8th birthday party, when I sat in my car across the street, listening through a Ring camera to Sarah's cruel whisper, "That old witch is better off gone anyway. She was wrong. So wrong. I'm not gone. I'm here, present. I'm part of Ethan's life in a way I haven't been in years. And more than that, I fought for him when he needed someone to fight for him. I documented and prepared, and stood my ground when it would have been easier to just fade away. And Sarah, she's the one who's gone now. By trying to push me out, she pushed herself away. Instead, by whispering poison, she poisoned her own relationships. By trying to control everyone around her, she lost control of everything that mattered. My grandson wished for me on his birthday, and now, every single day, his wish comes true. Because grandmothers don't give up. We don't disappear quietly. We don't let our grandchildren suffer alone. We fight, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when everyone tells us to just let it go. We fight because love is worth fighting for. And in the end, love wins. Ethan kicks the ball particularly hard, and it bounces off the fence with a satisfying thwack. He turns to me with a huge smile. Did you see that, Grandma? Did you see? I saw, baby. That was amazing. Watch, I'll do it again. I watch him play, and I smile, and I think about Frank, and how he'd be so proud of the man our son is becoming, the father he's learning to be, the family we're rebuilding from the ashes of what almost was lost. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. David comes out onto the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea, handing me one. Thanks for being here, Mom, he says quietly. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. We sit together in comfortable silence, watching Ethan play, and everything feels right. Not perfect. There's still healing to do, still therapy sessions, and difficult conversations, and the long process of rebuilding trust. But right, good, hopeful. My phone buzzes with a text. It's from Rita. How are things? I type back, we're good, we're really good, because we are. After months of pain and exclusion, and fighting, we finally are. And that old witch, she's exactly where she belongs, with her grandson, where love won, where truth mattered, where family means something real. I'm not gone, I'm home.